What up? Live here on the Broke Boys Sports Podcast. I'm Ashton Gene Lewis. This is supposed to be the episode I do where we talk about the best and the worst that sports has to offer. We get a chance to talk about every other sport under the sun, but life has been lifing hard the last couple. Well, really, honestly, it's been lifing hard since Monday, and I've had some car issues that have made me have to change up my schedule to work around something specifically, and it has resulted in me having to do a Sunday morning podcast at 11:03 racing time itself yet again to get this all done and talk about everything in the NFL for this upcoming week. So I'm not gonna sit on pomp and circumstance. If there was ever a week for me to be like super chill about coming up with predictions and stuff like that, it would be this one. I'm going to be semi looking down at my phone while I do this because your boy also needs to put his pick'ems in for this upcoming week in the season due to the fact that I forgot to put Thursday Night Football in and I lost out on easy points for me. But while we're waiting on me to pull that up on my phone, we'll talk about NFL season week number 2 and how you should still be in the mode where you're still having fun unless you're a Houston Texans fan, because it seems like everybody under the sun is hurt in some way, shape, or form. I cannot emphasize enough, I'm expecting the Texans to get slapped this Sunday. That's just me mentally, though. Anyway, let's talk about the pay-per-view matchups for this week from the top. If you're unfamiliar with this, I'm starting to do this season as well, where I talk about basically these are the matchups that if they could sell me a camera that only focused on one part of the field throughout the course of an NFL game and I could pay to watch it, I would pay them for this. The Chargers defensive line, Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, and Seabass. Well, the other Seabass. He says don't call him Seabass anymore, but you know it's just too easy when your name is Sebastian. Anyway, they're going up against the Titans offensive line, which has been, in the preseason reported to be one of the worst. It's going to be a great test. As you'll see, this is one of, by the way, really bad in numbers here. Let me help you out. Let me help myself out, actually, not you. But yeah, so one of the two matchups in the pay-per-view matchups are literally one of those moments where you're like, oh man, do you guys actually suck? Or was it just people who thought they knew what they were talking about in regards to, like offensive line play for your NFL team? And facts are, I question it all the time. There it is, much better, shinier, and with the correct numbers on it. I question it all the time as to how consistent offensive line play can be from week to week, but we're going to find out real fast here because my number one pick is definitely the Chargers defensive line versus the Titans offensive line. We already are super skeptical of the Titans offense as a whole. If you haven't been keeping up with it, there's it didn't come out until yesterday that DeAndre Hopkins was going to play today, which is usually a problem when you have your number one wide receiver kind of up in the air until the day before game day. And it happens like that sometimes. By the way, weird divergent tangent when it's all said and done. I saw something about how Arizona State has a media policy where you can't report on like blatantly obvious injuries you see in practice and stuff like that. So there was a situation where all the reporters knew that their starting quarterback was not going to be available to play in this week's game, but they couldn't say anything until the team officially announced it. And I thought that was kind of weird. And one of the reporters quote tweeted somebody's response and said, because somebody thought they were like setting up bettors or something like that, and the person was just like, no, like legitimately media policy says that if you want to be able to watch practice, you cannot report on injuries that you see, which I never thought about that, but it is kind of insane when it's all said and done. But yeah, who knows? Who cares? Anyway, number 2 on my pay-per-view list of basically, I need to see this matchup. I need to see this one. I want you locked in on Alex Highsmith versus Nick Chubb. I know that's not how linebackers in the run game work as often, especially considering Quan Alexander, who has bounced around a ton since he left the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He technically leads the Pittsburgh Steelers in tackles. Their defense as a whole is looking for a bounce-back kind of game, but 2, Alex Highsmith is the most veteran linebacker that they have on that squad, who I just attribute like, hey man, the tough assignments go to this dude. Like, what are we really talking about here? You know what I mean? So we're going Alex Highsmith versus Nick Chubb. Last one, it is yet again, hey man, do you guys actually suck? it's a great question, because last year the Rams offensive line was easily one of the worst in the NFL. Without question whatsoever. You know, they were like I said before, I come on the show when I would do the NFL breakdown, and I would be like, they are shoulder to shoulder. And if you know anything about playing offensive line, that's a bad place to be when you right next to the dude that you snapped the ball of, because if y'all shoulder to shoulder, somebody probably ran around you, and that's exactly what happened. We saw some damn near flawless offensive line play from the Rams last week when they went up against the Seattle Seahawks. They're going to go up against no offense to, Nwosu and everybody for the Seattle Seahawks defensive line, but the 49ers are significantly better. Javon Hargrave was feasting last week, and that's bad news for everybody. When the big dog up the middle is able to run free, and when I say run free, I mean, we're breaking free. Like, you can see it happening. Anyway, but yeah, combine that with Nick Bosa, time to find out. It's a divisional matchup. Time to find out what time it is. Have the Rams really cooked up a scheme around everything that's going around? No, I'm not going to be using the little coaching matchup thing that all these guys have with each other. By the way, if you've not been seeing it, you as a football fan should check out ESPN Daily from a couple days ago. They talked to one of the reporters followed Mike McDaniel and how he wakes up at 2 o'clock in the morning to get to work at 3 a.m. and why he does it. He goes into his drinking habit that ended up with him being in rehab. He talks about how he got fired from the Houston Texans and all that kind of stuff like that, and his connection with Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, and Sean McVay. If you don't know, all those guys used to work together on a certain NFL team's staff at some point or another, the Houston Texans. Anyway, they all used to work together for the Texans, and they used to work together for the Washington football team back in the day when Mike Shanahan came back into the league, and he took Kyle Shanahan from the Texans and his OC and all that kind of stuff like that. So basically like the modern day coaching geniuses all came from the same dude, and they all are cool with each other, and they have this weird thing where like one can they're like Highlander each other essentially. Like only one can, like the originator of it is like Kyle Shanahan is like the leader of all these guys or whatever, right? Like if it wasn't for Kyle, a lot of these guys they'd be in a totally different path that they were going on right now. Anyway, check out ESPN Daily. Mike McDaniel talks about it. He's also on the Pivot podcast most recently, and he talks about his journey as like a football guy and all this kind of stuff like that. It's actually really cool because Mike McDaniel is the least suspecting out of the group of tactical geniuses that what is it called, the Fun Bunch or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, that's all I got on little superlative / like funsy stuff. Let's talk about football. Let's talk a little football, shall we? I'm just gonna go in the order that my ESPN app has for me to do my pick'em, because that's what we're here to do, guys. We're not actually here to record a podcast. We're here for me to get my pick'ems right, because I'm technically in first place in the league right now, even though I didn't pick Thursday Night Football, and I would have picked the Eagles. You guys all saw it on the Thursday episode of Loose Thoughts number 1. I was picking the Eagles, and by the way, was wrong about how the game was going to go down. Did not expect Kirk Cousins to sleepwalk. You know what I mean? He sleepwalked his way to 4 touchdowns. Anyway, the Packers taking on the Falcons. This one seems like a layup on this one. I mean, this is one of those moments where you just got to be excited to see Bijan Robinson do cool stuff, right? I can't wait to see Bijan Robinson do cool things. I'm going with the Packers. It's week 2, man. Sometimes you got to take like the obvious things and just accept them. Sometimes you got to take the obvious gifts and accept them. And I'm just going to go with the Packers and keep it relatively simple, just because like a defense doesn't fall apart overnight. And for as much as you talk about Arthur Smith being super creative, they haven't found their rhythm in terms of play calling yet, based off what we saw versus the Carolina Panthers. That game was relatively close throughout the course of the game, right? A lot of that is due to the fact that the Panthers turned the ball over multiple times. And this is, a couple things here. This could start the whole, like, get rid of Desmond Ridder thing, right? Which is looming. At some point, it's going to happen, because Desmond he does not risk the biscuit enough. You know what I mean? Like, if he had a little bit more Jameis, which, by the way, what a time to be alive to be saying if you had a little bit more Jameis in you. But he's got the kind of guys that are worth risking it, to the point where people might be a little bit more understanding. But to Desmond Ridder's point, just to statistical analysis, you're more likely to win games the fewer times you turn the ball over, and Desmond Ridder has the fewest interceptions per pass attempts since he entered the NFL. So he keeps that streak alive. I don't know how much, like a lot of his throws are like underneath stuff, which is cool or whatever, because tight ends are really good at underneath stuff. But yeah, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, everybody's waiting for those guys to explode. Everybody waiting for them to get loose, if you will. I don't know how loose Drake London's going to get against Zaire Alexander, but I guess we're gonna find out. That's a fun matchup to watch here as well. Also, Quay Walker versus Bijan Robinson / Tyler Algier. Keep your eyes open. That's going to be fun for everyone. I'm taking the Packers on a straight up, though. The Raiders are playing the Bills. By the way, if you told me that one team would be 1-0 and one of these teams would be 0-1, I would have had the opposite ones here. The Raiders technically on a one-game win streak. Can you be on a one-game win streak is the question. Is that how math works? But anyway, the Raiders coming off of a strong win against the Denver Broncos team that I think is a lot better than we believe it is, because maybe Jimmy Garoppolo is doing that thing where he plays slightly above average football on a pretty consistent basis, which sets them up to be able to beat an opponent that turns the ball over at all, right? And I think that was a big part of how they were able to beat the Broncos, because the Broncos just don't have an explosive offense. Allegedly, they're getting Jerry Jeudy back this Sunday. The question is, are they getting full Jerry Jeudy back, or are they getting the guy who looks like Jerry Jeudy and wears his jersey and kind of runs the routes or whatever? I guess we'll find out. But it's man, I really want to lean for the upset, man, but it's just hard. It's hard to believe that the Bills are going to come out here and stink it up 2 times in a row. I am interested to see if the linebacker situation continues to be a problem, like Matt Milano not having Terrell Edmonds. Terrell Edmonds, speed freak when it comes to playing the linebacker position. And, we're going to find out, right? I'll take the Bills. Just off consistency. Big playoff matchup, AFC North, super important one here. The Bengals will be playing the Ravens, and it won't be in the middle of a rainstorm, so it means that Joey Burrow will probably be able to throw the ball. The Ravens, obviously heavily injured in terms of like Ronnie Stanley. They lost J.K. Dobbins, so this is going to be the Justice Hill show, a lot of us are assuming, because the whole Gus Edwards experiment was pretty cool while it lasted, but it's very clear that Gus Edwards is very good when he's the number 2 running back. But the defensive side of this, Brandon Stevens is hurt, and that's going to hurt the secondary big time. But Joe Burrow versus Marlon Humphrey, that's going to be a huge matchup. A lot of people have been questioning Marlo. A lot of people have been questioning whether or not Marlo got the juice this past really this entire offseason. People are talking about like they don't have a star-studded secondary, and I'm like, the secondary that like outperformed all those guys who were supposed to be really good for the Browns. You know what I mean? So Bengals, Ravens in this one. The Ravens did not look good versus the Texans. And of course, Joe Burrow coming off of his worst game as a professional quarterback. Not great for the current state of the team, but to keep it relatively simple, I will take the Bengals off the strength of their defense, man. And I hate picking against the Ravens. I think most of you guys know that. I hate picking against the Ravens, but it feels like the Bengals defensively still went out there and did their thing versus the Browns. They just didn't have any offensive support, which was hindered by the fact that it was raining, right? Seahawks Lions, this is one of my favorite games. This is going to be one of my favorite games, hands down. The Seahawks playing at noon, which means I need to get the hell out of here because I'm actually going to the Woodlands, which is like an hour away from where I'm at right now. And I'm going to be late. Shout out to John because he's going to be a good friend and be forgiving and not judge me for being late. He's going to judge me for being late. All my teammates do. The Seahawks take on the Lions. This one is it's going to be huge in terms of the ability for the Seahawks to be able to bounce back, because this is another play. The Detroit Lions are a playoff caliber team, in case nobody told you guys. So get mentally prepared for that. I don't think they, as a city, are mentally prepared for the fact that they're like a legitimate playoff team. But nonetheless, the Lions are a force to be reckoned with. The reports are showing that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to get a lot more run. I'm sure they're more than happy to give him the ball a ton more after they saw what Kyrie Williams did to the Seattle Seahawks up front last week. The question becomes what kind of impact is Jamal Adams going to have? The bigger question, I think, is the offense going to show up for the second half of this game? Not great that Aiden Hutchinson and Justin Houston are going to be able to go up against a combination of injured / not there left and right tackle for the Seattle Seahawks. So that's fun for everybody, right? It's going to come down to Geno Smith's playmaking. Some of that's going to have to be outside the pocket, man. Like that's just facts. Jackson Smith and Jigba though could be on deck to have one of those big games. A lot of people, when you have to deal with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Oh, by the way, Will Dissly. Maybe back at the tight end position. He kind of disappeared for a couple years there. Obviously, him and Noah Fant kind of go back and forth in terms of like being able to split carries. Noah Fant's a great run blocker up front. Kenneth Walker, the second, going to be a huge part of whether or not this game goes sideways for the Seahawks early. But I'll root for the upset on this one and pick the Seahawks. Even though a lot of the logic shows that the Lions are more than likely going to make plays, I'll bank on a better defensive performance from the Seahawks defensive backs up front to be able to turn the ball over and give more opportunities to the Seahawks. Because that was the biggest issue. Like there was a lot of time where Sean McVay was able to scheme up stuff where the Seahawks defensive backs were half a second or like a couple steps too late to be able to intercept the ball. And obviously some of that is Matthew Stafford, right? Doing his thing. But yeah, Titans, Chargers, next game here. Give me the Chargers. Better team in terms of like overall talent, despite Ryan Tannehill coming off of his worst game as an NFL quarterback that we've seen. My question starts to become, can they find a way to work around Tannehill when there's issues? Because there's going to be issues in this game. Let's be for real. J.C. Jackson is probably going to take away DeAndre Hopkins, right? Maybe mainly because DeAndre is coming off of an injury. J.C. Jackson also coming off an injury too, or whatever. But J.C. is, he's the real deal. Last week versus Tyreek Hill, he may have struggled a bunch. It's mainly because he doesn't run at Olympic level speeds. That's why he struggled. That's it. That's pretty much it. But yeah, man, every year it feels like tractor season starts earlier and earlier. Is that a sign of global warming or something? I don't know. The Bears take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Give me the Bucs, man. I'm not playing with this game. Look, when there's a super strong defense against like an offense that literally can't complete 3 passes in a row, it's real simple for me, man. I get it. Justin Fields a playmaker. That's fantastic. The D-line for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they got people who got legs too, man. I'll be taking the Buccaneers. This is like a layup for me. Mostly because of the defensive presence that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers consistently have been putting out there for the last 5 years, right? It's become like a staple. A lot of that defensive presence is the defensive line and the secondary. And tight windows, less time equals Bears having a bad time, right? The Bears don't even like the concept of the forward pass. So that makes it a lot more difficult. But yeah, I'll take the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Kansas City Chiefs are taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is a huge matchup for sure, man. Jags looked pretty bad in that second half of the matchup with the Indianapolis Colts last week. A lot of it was... would you say it was the offense falling asleep? Because it felt like the defense for the Jags really stepped up, and Anthony Richardson just made crazy playmaking level plays, despite the fact that he was only throwing to one guy, which is concerning when, your opponent is throwing to one guy consistently and he's still getting away with it 7 plays later on a singular drive. But nonetheless, to try and say the Jaguars didn't really, shut it down is absurd. Like, that game was close towards the end, but the Jaguars went out there. I want to say they had like 8 possessions on the defensive side of the ball in the second half of that game, and there was 2 touchdowns scored. Yeah, the offense was probably the bigger issue, but the Kansas City Chiefs are back in full strength, and it's hard to bet against them, man. It's hard to pick against the Chiefs to lose to the Jags. It's hard to also believe that the wide receiver group for the Chiefs is just going to continue to drop every single ball that's thrown towards them. Also, I will say this, Thursday Night Football seems like it was 50 years ago when it was really just last week. 2 weeks ago, actually. Anyway, the Colts are taking on the Texans. This is sadly one of those matchups where I feel like the Colts are about to steamroll the Texans. Laramie Tunsil probably isn't playing, so there's going to be a major issue in terms of the pass rush situation, even though there was already going to be a major issue with the pass rush situation up front because there was already enough. There was, 2 of the 5 starting offensive linemen were the only ones available, and now it's one of the originally slotted 5 starting offensive linemen. Rookie quarterback unclear situation with the wide receivers, right? Like Nico Collins had a couple of good catches, but they were going up against a pretty good secondary. One thing about the Colts that could help out the Texans is they have like the least experienced defensive back room in the NFL, mainly because they have a bunch of dudes that are either draft picks or undrafted free agents, right? They don't have like any vets whatsoever. It makes it really easy for me to take the Colts. One, because your boy loves good defense, bro, and two, the Texans are a relatively young team. I'm excited to see what Will Anderson does because you know one thing I noticed with the Colts last week versus the Jaguars? They ain't fixed that offensive line. It's 3 years later and they still got O-line problems, right? Not to say they haven't tried. They just haven't figured it out. The Rams are taking on the San Francisco 49ers. This is the 3:05 game. It's going to be a ton of fun. I love this... This matchup is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a great test to see if the Rams are for real or if the Seahawks maybe are slowly sliding down a very steep cliff in terms of sliding back to being a team that doesn't have a defined quarterback up front, right? The 49ers taking on the Rams. Obviously, both of these teams are coming off really huge wins. The 49ers coming off the most decisive win of the weekend. Despite what you say about the Cowboys versus the Giants were not a good football team. Whereas the Pittsburgh Steelers were slotted to be a division champion, and the 49ers said, like, I guess you can win the AFC North after we finish kicking your ass. But yeah, that's pretty much what happened, man. I am very intrigued to see what Matthew Stafford can get away with in this one. Puka Nacua, who was hurt after that matchup versus the Seahawks, despite one hell of a rookie debut. You know what I mean? Pretty good. I'm excited to see this one because it's going to be a good test to find out what's real and what's not with the Rams early on in the season. Not necessarily to say that it's not going to be that case later on in the year, all that kind of stuff like that. How creative is Sean McVay going to be against Kyle Shanahan? But give me the Niners. Give me the Niners up front. I'm banking on the defense. Plus, we've already seen Brock Purdy going sling. Brock Purdy is back to slinging that thing. So, yeah. The Giants are taking on the Cardinals in probably the least fun matchup of the entire weekend, which means it'll probably come down to the wire. But yeah, man, dude, if there was ever a time for the Cardinals to get a dub, it might be this game. And I might take it. You know what? I'm doing it, man. This is like, it seems like a layup for an upset, even though I know that the Giants are not a team that's gonna get routinely shut out 40-0, right? But saw a little bit of juice from the Cardinals, and if there's ever gonna be a team that's competing for, if there's a team competing for the number one pick in the draft early on in the season when they can't like pull people off the field due to injury, a part of the tanking process, and late in the season once they feel like they've locked up the number one pick, are the best times to try and get them, pick them on wins or whatever. So I'll take the Cardinals. We'll see what happens, man. If there's too many, honestly, the Cardinals are one turnover away from getting smoked in this game by the Giants. So, but yeah, time to test that D-line, bro, because the whole Saquon, the problem is that the Giants have the capability of running the ball, and if they just decided to run the ball the entire game versus the Cardinals, that would be the path to victory, but they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. If they just stuck to like coming up with a 50 billion different ways to be able to run the ball, they'd win. And it's just not going to happen. I just realized now, as I'm going through this breakdown, that I need to check my fantasy teams, which means I need to speed up the pace so that you can get to getting ready for NFL football. We got the Jets versus the Dallas Cowboys. I'm not even going to waste your time on this one, man. I don't have a creative way to convince you that the Cowboys have the significantly better defense in this one. I would not be surprised if this is kept close by the simple fact that the Jets defense plays lights out, regardless of who's playing quarterback. See, there's every once in a while, there's times in the NFL where the mental fortitude of a defensive group displays itself. And it's the ability for that defensive group to not play under the understanding of who's going out there to play offense. They go out there to play defense and get stops because that's what defenses do, right? They're not discouraged by the fact that they know they're about to be out there 3 plays later on offense. They're focused on, we're trying to beat these guys up front, right? And not to say that every team in the NFL doesn't do it, but the fact of the matter is that the what happens on the other side of the field in terms of the offense, the other side of the ball, affects the willingness and the effort and the morale of the defense that's on the other half of it, man. That's just facts. That's how it always goes, bro. At some point, especially early on in the season, I can see them, the Jets making this one super close, not only off of being able to turn the ball over, but combine that with the fact that they are just nasty up front on defense. And these are two potentially top 5 defenses in the NFL. Only time will tell. The mysterious number 1 defense in the NFL will soon reveal itself, I'd imagine. The Commanders are taking on the Broncos. I have no idea where to really go on this one overall. I don't believe very much in terms of the juice that the Broncos have on offense, because I think there are 9 games in a row where they have scored under 20 points. And if you haven't heard that stat, basically if the Broncos scored 21 points, which is 3 touchdowns in the NFL. You got 4 quarters of play, you scored 3 touchdowns. Basically, last year, if they scored 21 points in every single game that they played, they would have been like a top 4 seed in the AFC. Because I think they would have been like 12-6 or 12-7 or something like that. It would have been 12-6 because that's how good their defense has been overall. But the Commanders the Commanders bringing in here, they seem like they're the more balanced team. They seem like they're the team that's going to be able to make more plays in more aspects of the game. And I say that understanding that their defense is ridiculously good. There's going to be a ton of pressure in this game put on Russell Wilson, and we all know how Russ does when he's just under just a tad bit too much pressure. So yeah, I'll take the Commanders just because they're the more well-rounded team, and it feels like they have more paths to victory than the Broncos, not necessarily because I got some nuanced football concept to go behind him, but yeah, banking on pressure to get to Russell Wilson. I might be rich soon. The Dolphins are taking on the Patriots. This one's going to be a ton of fun because the New England Patriots always got something up their sleeve. Nothing is ever simple. Nothing is ever sweet when it comes to playing against the Patriots. But yeah, Tua Tagovailoa coming off one of the best games, if not the best game of his entire professional career against a potential playoff team and the LA Chargers, taking on the New England Patriots, who lost by 5 points to the reigning Super Bowl runner-up, right? It didn't look great. The thing I'm looking for in this one is to find out if the Dolphins defense is as locked down as I think it is. This is a divisional matchup, in case you forgot. I mean, I've picked the Dolphins to win the Super Bowl, right? Banking on the defense to show up and look like the massive threat that they look like on paper. Only time will tell if that is going to be the case. But yeah, I will be banking on the Dolphins to come out here, and maybe just a little bit of run game sprinkled in there can go a long, long way. The other aspect of it is that Jonathan Jones is probably hurt. Just like, and he's going up against either Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle every single play. That's a tough ask, buddy. Kyle Duggar, one of the best defensive backs / safeties in the NFL, but man, they've proven themselves time and time again to be a totally different group of guys when it comes to the wide receiver position up front, man. And it's tough not to. It's tough. It's tough not to believe in the Dolphins, so why fight it? You know what I mean? Why fight it? I'll take the Dolphins on that one. The Panthers and the Saints duking it out in this one. The Saints came off a close game versus the Tennessee Titans. The Panthers come off of a close loss versus the Atlanta Falcons. I actually think this is going to be an upset win for the Panthers, in the sense that the Panthers, look, they may not have been the most talented team in that game versus the Falcons, but they made it work. We saw a lot of pressure up front from the Panthers, and that affected we saw a lot of pressure up front from the Panthers, and that affected Desmond Ridder's ability to go out there and perform well. I expect to see some similar results, man. Brian Burns, Derek Brown turned up on this one. Hopefully Bryce Young is going to do a better job of protecting the ball in terms of not turning it over. That would be fantastic for all of us, right? Terrence Marshall Jr. seems to be the guy that he's dependent on and kind of banking on to do really well. I find that surprising, but it's good to see because we know Terrence Marshall Jr., based off of his college tape, he got the juice, man. He's a playmaker type guy up front. And then the Panthers understanding they have a really good run game, probably going to mix it in a little bit better. That was the big thing. It felt like the pass was setting up the run for the Panthers, and leaning into that can go a long way, man, especially when you want to be successful against teams that technically have more talent than you do. So this is the last matchup. This is Monday Night Football, biggest matchup here. Steelers versus the Browns. A loss against the Steelers, a loss for the Steelers could send the entire city of Pittsburgh into an absolute fucking spiral. Let's be for real. Losing to the Browns is one thing, but losing to the Browns after getting smoked by the Niners and thinking that you're coming into this season to make a run towards not only the playoffs again, but AFC North champions. Ugh. And then going out there and then remembering Kenny Pickett plays quarterback for your team and what that means overall. If we get even a little bit of what we saw out of the Browns defense last week, it's a wrap for the Steelers on this one, man. I get it. I came on the Thursday podcast or the Tuesday podcast and said y'all need to stop lying to yourselves about how well Deshaun Watson played. Deshaun Watson played better than Kenny Pickett did versus the Niners, and that's not how transitive property works or whatever when it comes to football. But nonetheless, I would imagine, and it's very easy for me to imagine, Deshaun's going to make more plays than Kenny Pickett. Deshaun is going to make way more plays than Kenny Pickett throughout the course of this game, right? We saw instances where Patrick Peterson got cooked by Brandon Ayuk, even though one time he burned him pretty bad. The second time on that crazy that back shoulder throw touchdown, that was Brock Purdy and Brandon Ayuk doing their thing. But Patrick Peterson was right there. He had his hand on the ball, just couldn't knock it out. I don't think the defense is going to come out here and score 3 touchdowns, so we got a problem. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's pretty much it, man. That's pretty much it. Nick Chubb, an absolute force. Feels like the Browns got everything going their way, even though last week versus the Bengals felt like it was a test of who's got the most tricks in their bag, right? The Browns were one of many teams that used the pass to set up the run. And I know Amari Cooper is supposedly hurt for this game, either playing hurt or not playing at all. And the biggest issue overall is knowing that the Steelers they can only operate within this certain box of capability, even though and especially, Deontay Johnson is out for this game as well too. But they can only operate in this certain box of offensive capability. They're limited, so limited. Super limited in some perspectives on what they're capable of doing, right? And that's going to play them out of so many games, including games against teams that are more talented than them, like the Browns. So, yeah, I'm taking the Browns, and it's not hard. It's going to be fun to watch what the Browns defense does because they're going up against allegedly one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL based off what we saw last week, but we can also attest to the fact that we know the 49ers defensive line is insane. And ladies and gentlemen, we've done it. Somehow, some way, I'm here, you're here, and it's only 11:36. That means you got a full 20 minutes to do what you need to do your thing, and get back to getting ready for Sunday. I'm getting ready for an amazing Sunday. If you watched the Colorado State game until 2:00 in the morning, like I did, shout out to you. It was worth it. It was worth it, man. I also heard that allegedly there's people talking about Deion Sanders becoming a Hall of Fame college football coach. Pump your brakes. Pump the brakes. Hype is real, though. Hype is real, and it is peaking. Hype is peaking. USC week is 2 weeks away for Colorado. Oh, no, it's next week. It's this week, technically. Going to be a lot of fun. They're probably going to lose. Mentally prepare yourself for that. Anyway, that's all I got, man. Enjoy Sunday. Wash your hands. Wash your ass. Don't double dip. Drink some water, too. Mix in a lot of waters. It's Sunday, guys. It's been a long weekend of football. Power through. Don't forget, Monday night, it's a doubleheader. So do what you got to do for that mentally as well. Not a lot of sleep to be had this week. Oh, and go home, Roger.